Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something pretty fundamental about the very first civilizations. Imagine this. What if ancient Sumer, the cradle of civilization, wasn't really built on massive human effort at first? What if it was built on something as simple as the tides, the daily ebb and flow?
It does sound almost too neat, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the core idea in this really groundbreaking new study. It's called Morphodynamic Foundations of Sumer, and it genuinely challenges a lot of the old assumptions about how these first cities got started.
Right. So our mission here in this deep dive is to unpack that, how this interplay of water, land, and let's face it, human cleverness sparked this huge shift in history. For ages, people have wondered, how did they manage such advanced farming and complex societies in that harsh, dry region, especially before the really big irrigation canals came along?
Exactly.
That's been the puzzle. This study suggests there might be some surprising answers.
Definitely.
So maybe let's start with Sumer itself. Just remind everyone why it's so important.
Well, yeah, Sumer. It's where we see the first writing, the wheel, really organized, intensive agriculture, all happening in these amazing city-states like Uruk, Lagash, in modern-day Iraq. It's foundational, really.
And the traditional thinking on how they managed economically.
It often involved things like herding animals, maybe trade networks, or just having a mix of resources nearby. But explaining the huge food surpluses needed for cities, well, that was always tricky before the big irrigation projects we know about from later periods. The early numbers didn't quite seem to add up to support that level of complexity.
Okay, so the old models had gaps. How does this new study fill them? What's the breakthrough?
So this is the work led by Liviu Giosan at Woods Hole and Reed Goodman at Clemson, published in PLOS One just recently, August 20th, 2025. They've built this paleo-environmental model, basically a picture of the ancient environment. And it argues that tidal dynamics, the effect of the tides, were hugely important for early farming and, well, even how society was structured.
Tidal dynamics.
Yeah, and Liviu Giosan puts it really well. He says Sumer was, and I'm quoting here, literally and culturally built on the rhythms of water. He stresses that these tidal cycles, plus how the river delta landscape was changing over time, what they call morphodynamics.
Morphodynamics, right. How the land itself shifts.
Exactly. That all this was deeply woven into the myths, innovations, and daily lives of the Sumerians. It's a whole new perspective on their world.
That's a really powerful image. So paint us a picture of this ancient landscape. How did it make tides so central?
Okay, so picture this. Go back about 7,000 to 5,000 years ago. The Persian Gulf. It reached way, way further inland than it does now.
Much bigger then.
Much bigger and reaching further north. This geography gave them a huge advantage. Twice a day, the tides pushed fresh river water far up the Tigris and Euphrates.
Ah, okay. So the rivers were tidal much further inland.
Precisely. And the early communities there, they figured out how to use this incredibly reliable water cycle.
Which sounds like, genius, really. It suggests they could get high yields from farming, but maybe without the back-breaking labor we usually associate with early irrigation. How did they manage it?
Well, that's the key. They weren't building massive dams or digging endless canals, not at first. Instead, they used pretty simple, short canals, just enough to channel that tidal water onto their fields and date palm groves.
So the tide itself did most of the work.
Pretty much. The study describes this tidal irrigation as steady, straightforward, and benign. It wasn't like a destructive flood. It was predictable. It naturally watered the low-lying areas. And crucially, when the tide went out, the ebb tide helped flush salts away from the fields.
That's clever. So it was kind of self-cleaning, too.
In a way, yeah. A self-regulating irrigation and drainage system, they call it. Minimal upkeep needed.
That really does change the picture. It helps explain that big leap, doesn't it, from the earlier Ubaid period villages.
Which were more scattered, simpler.
Right, to the Uruk period, where you get proto-cities, more hierarchy, real complexity. This easier farming could fuel that. And you mentioned myths, like Eridu, the supposed first city, and its water god, Enki.
Exactly. The researchers suggest this deep connection to the water, maybe even Enki's role as a water deity, could stem from this very real tide-driven environment they lived in.
Wow. And how did the researchers figure all this out, looking back thousands of years?
They used some pretty cool methods. High-resolution satellite data to map the old landscape features. They also took new sediment cores near Lagash, drilling down to get layers of ancient mud and pollen.
Like reading layers of history in the ground?
Sort of, yeah. These are the paleo-environmental proxies. They tell you what plants grew, what the water was like. They combine that new data with existing geological studies and archaeological finds to build this detailed picture of how the coast changed.
Okay, so for a while, Sumer had this amazing natural advantage, almost effortless farming, fueling growth. A golden age, you could say.
You could, a sort of early golden age based on tidal rhythms.
But landscapes change, environments shift. That tidal engine couldn't last forever, could it? What happened next?
That's the next crucial chapter. The rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, kept doing what rivers do, carrying sediment, building land. They slowly built out their deltas further into the Gulf. And as they did, they gradually blocked that tidal influence from reaching further inland.
Ah, so the land itself grew and pushed the tides back.
Effectively, yes. The study points to a significant decline in tides impacting those inland areas somewhere between 6,000 and 5,000 years ago, a major environmental shift.
Okay, so if this easy tidal farming was their foundation, losing it must have been, well, a crisis.
A huge one, an ecological and economic crisis, as the paper calls it. The system they relied on just wasn't working the same way anymore, especially further inland.
What do people do in a crisis like that? Do they just leave?
Well, some might have, but the established centers, the bigger settlements, they had power, they had organization. The study suggests this crisis actually required an ambitious societal response. Instead of abandoning ship, they adapted, they pivoted.
How?
They doubled down on a different kind of water management. Large-scale fluvial irrigation, using the river flow itself, not the tides. Building much bigger canals, managing floods, controlling the river. Harder work, requiring more organization.
And that becomes the Sumer we often think of, the one defined by those massive irrigation works.
Exactly. Those huge projects for irrigation and flood control, that's what came to define the later golden age of Sumer. So it wasn't just about surviving the crisis, it was a massive, proactive reorganization of society.
Reed Goodman's quote seems really relevant here. He said something about static landscapes.
Yeah, he said, "We often picture ancient landscapes as static, but the Mesopotamian delta was anything but. Its restless, shifting land demanded ingenuity and cooperation, sparking some of history's first intensive farming and pioneering bold social experiments."
So the environmental pressure actually drove innovation, but also social change.
Big time. Building and maintaining these huge new water systems needed tons of coordinated labor. This likely led to more people concentrated in settlements, more social layers, stratification, and yes, more inequality.
So managing the water crisis helped forge the state.
That seems to be the implication. Holly Pittman over at the Penn Museum is quoted saying, "Rapid environmental change fostered inequality, political consolidation, and the ideologies of the world's first urban society." The environmental challenge was a powerful catalyst for creating those complex state structures.
Well, it's a much more dynamic story than just they built canals. It connects environment, technology, society, even ideology. So bringing this home, what's the takeaway for us looking back at this today?
I think Liviu Giosan nails it in his conclusion. He says, "Our work highlights both the opportunities and perils of social reinvention in the face of severe environmental crisis." It's ancient history, sure, but it really resonates, doesn't it? It's about human adaptation, resilience, the choices societies make when their environment changes dramatically.
And it makes you rethink myths, too. The idea that real history might be hidden in myth. You mentioned the Sumerian flood stories earlier, or Enki separating fresh and salt water.
Right. Those stories, maybe they aren't just fantasy, maybe they're echoes, cultural memories of this incredible dramatic landscape metamorphosis their ancestors actually lived through, the changing coastline, the shifting rivers, the crisis.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? If this story of Sumer is so tied to the water levels changing, what other historical truths might be hiding in plain sight within ancient myths?
Yeah, truths that maybe only this kind of research mixing geology, archaeology, climate science can unlock.
And maybe, understanding how Sumer navigated its environmental challenges. Perhaps it gives us a different lens for looking at how societies then and maybe even now deal with big environmental shifts. Something to think about.